Hello everyone. In this topic we will discuss about constraints in SQL. So constraints in SQL, these are nothing but restrictions or the conditions that are used on the columns of the table to preserve the data correctness. So that means, so you have a table. Assume that you have an employee table. So you have attributes employee ID, employee name, salary, and department number. Okay, so assume that these are all the attributes of this particular table employee. Constraints are nothing but the conditions you are applying for each attribute, or you can apply the conditions to each attribute wherever it is necessary, or you can leave it as blank, or no conditions will be going to apply for this attributes. So constraints are the conditions or the restrictions that are used on the column, that are used on the attributes of the table to preserve. Why it is used? To preserve the data correctness. So correctly, if you want to reserve the data correctly, if you want to store the data in the table, these constraints are used. So in that, the first constraint is, first one is not null. So not null is a constraint in SQL. So this not null constraint, this will ensure that at least some value should be present for an attribute. At least some value should be present. Not null, it should not be null value. At least some value should be present for an attribute. So a table, so suppose this is a table, consider this is a table. A table can have more than one not null constraints. Suppose if you are making this ID, employee ID, as a not null constraint, you can make this employee name also as a not null constraint. You can apply the conditions to both the attributes or all the attributes, whichever you are up. If you want to apply for all the attributes, then you can give the not null constraint to each attribute. So how to do that one? I will write. And one more thing, these conditions you need to apply whenever you are creating the table. So how you will be going to create the table? What is the statement? Create table employee ID. The data type of this ID I am giving integer, comma, name is a data type of variable character. I'll give the value 50. I'm making this as not null. Not null. So I'm applying the condition not null to this name attribute. So that means, so you can give the condition not null to ID also. Now in this table, while creating the table, create table employee, ID is an integer data type, name is an variable character data type. I'm giving the value 50. So for this I'm giving the condition or the restrictions I'm applying, that is not null. So whenever you are giving this name as a not null, that means you cannot leave name column as an empty. At least some value should be present in the name column. You cannot leave name column as an empty. Not null is neither a zero. It is not a zero. Not null means it is not a zero. It is neither a zero nor a blank space. At least some value should be written. At least some value should be stored. At least some value should be insert in this particular attribute or column. So not null is neither a zero nor a blank space. Second constraint is unique constraint. Constraints are nothing but the restrictions or the conditions. So unique constraint, So this constraint will be going to check for the duplicate values. Suppose in the employee table ID. So if you are making this ID as a unique, then you should not enter any duplicate values. Suppose if you are entering the values like this, ID 1, 2, 3, 3, no, you can't enter the duplicate values because this number is repeating. So it will not, if you are giving unique constraint to this particular attribute, then this will give the restriction, this will be restricted that no duplicate values will be inserted to this particular attribute. So this is a thing. So unique constraint, it checks for the duplicate values. If there is any duplicate value you inserted, then it will throw a error message. It checks for the duplicate value. A unique column can have multiple null value. So if you are giving null value, so this is correct because null value is not equal to null value. Null is neither a 0 nor a blank space. So if any of the column can have more than one null values, multiple null value can be inserted because null is not equal to null value. Okay, so this is a condition that is unique. It is checks for the duplicate value. So but null here, 2 times null is there, but null is not equal to null value. This null is not same as this null value. Okay, null is not a duplicate value. So how to write the condition for this? So while creating the table, you have to restrict the column. Create table employee. So I am taking one more attribute, email variable character 20. I'm making this as unique. Okay, so this is how you will be going to write. So I'll write here and then I'll show you. Create table employee email. I'm making as variable character with the values 20. I'm making this as unique. So you just close this one. So that means you are applying the condition to this attribute. So what is the condition? Unique. That means no duplicate values will be inserted into this particular column. Next, third one is check constraint. Check constraint. See, this check constraint is used to enforcing some additional conditions with respect to the particular requirements of, if it is a business requirement, then you can restrict that particular column with the help of this check constraint. So how you are going to write here? So suppose for example, if you want to make a salary of an employee, it should be greater than 3,000 or 30,000. Then you can give you can use this check constraint to restrict this particular salary column. Or age of a person, age of an employee, or age of a person, it should be greater than or equal to 18. So if you want to vote for any person, then so you can restrict like this. So that means check constraints will allow only the specific value. Only specific value you can able to insert to this particular column. So for example, I will write the statement like this: create table student. So take age as an attribute. Age is an integer data type. Okay. Check. What I am checking? I am checking the attribute age. Okay, so what is the condition I am giving? Check age is greater than or equal to 18. Suppose if in an election, if any of the person is, he should be, his age should be greater than or equal to 18, then only he can vote for the election. Correct, right? So like this, in that particular condition, you can restrict this column like age is an integer data type. Check, giving the condition or restricting this particular column like check age is greater than or equal to 18. So if this is the case, so in the table, so if this is a student table, then ID, name, age. Okay, so if this is a table which is containing the attributes like this, ID is 1, name is ABC. So if I enter the age 16, then it won't take. So it will throw an error message. Why? Because we are restricting this age column, that is age should be greater than or equal to 18. You can't enter 16 value here. Suppose if it is 18, if you enter 18, then it will be going to take it, that value will be going to insert it into the table. Okay, so this is how you will be going to restrict the column with the help of this check constraint. Next constraint is primary key constraint. So primary key constraint, it is used for identifying each record uniquely in the table. So suppose if it is a student table, okay, student will be having a student ID, student name and department like this. Assume that these are all the three attributes of this particular table. Okay, so ID, name, department. Suppose the name of a person is, name of a student is Ram and name of one more student name is also a Ram. Okay, but the ID of this particular student will not be same. This should not be same. That means, so if you are setting this column, that is this attribute as a primary key, that means, so if you are restricting, if you are applying the condition to this ID attribute as a primary key, then it is a combination of not null and unique. Not null and unique constraint. Primary key is a combination of, primary key is also a constraint. It is a combination of not null constraint and unique key constraint. Not null means we already studied that not null is you cannot able to enter the null values. Null value cannot be able to enter in this particular column. That is one condition. And unique means no duplicate value will be inserted into this column. So you cannot enter same value repeatedly. No, this is not possible. And you cannot write, you cannot make it as a null value. So this is not possible. So that means primary key constraint is a combination of not null and unique key. And in a table, you can make only one primary key per table. You can make only one primary key per table. Suppose if this is the student table, so if you are making this ID as a primary key, then you can't make name as a primary key or department as a primary key or contact number as a primary key. Okay, so only one attribute you can make it as a primary key. So you can write like this, create table. So all these constraints, all these conditions you can give while create table creation. Create table, student, ID is an integer data type. So make this as a primary key, comma. Second constraint is name. Name is a variable character. I'll give the value 50. So like this, department. Department is an integer. So this is how you will be going to create the primary key, or you will going to apply the primary key to this particular table. Create table, student ID I am making as a primary key. So if you are restricting this ID, this column as a primary key, then it cannot be a null value and there will be no duplicate values. So next one is foreign key. So foreign key is a referential integrity constraint. It is a referential integrity constraint. So this constraint will be going to create the relationship between two table. So for example, I will be going to create one table employee. So here I will write the attributes employee ID, employee name, employee salary and department number, in which this particular employee belongs to which department number. So I will be making this as a primary key. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, name is A, B, C, just an example. I'm making 300 and department number is 112233. So this is just an example. Okay, so now I will be going to create one more table, that is department table. Department table. This department table will be having department number, department name as a two attribute. So I will be writing 112233 and department name is XYZ ABC and PQR. So assume that this is a name I had given to this particular number. So here department number, in this table I am making department number as a primary key constraint. I am making this as a primary key constraint. So in this table I have one more attribute with the same name, that is department number. So there is a relationship between these two table, employee and department table. So if you want to check for which employee, this suppose if this employee belongs to which department number, which department, or then if that is the case, then you have to go for this table. So department number 11 is XYZ. So that means employee ID is 1 whose name is A. A belongs to the department 11. So what is 11? That is XYZ. Suppose this is a department name, accounts department. Okay, so 11, this refers to accounts department. That means this particular person A, he belongs to accounts department. Okay, so now we are building a relationship between these two tables. So what is the relationship? Employee, he belongs to which department. Okay, so for this, here you are using whatever the values you are entering in this table, that values you are using in this table, employee table. That means, so this will become the primary key and this will become the foreign key, because all these values is coming from this table. That means this is the master table. This is the master table. So whatever the value you are entering, so that is why it is a master table. So whatever the values you are using in this table, so this will become child table. This will become child table. Why? Because the values you are using from the main table. So this is the master table and this will be the child table. So why I am giving here foreign key? Because it is a referential integrity constraint. That means it will be going to build a relationship between these two tables, department table and employee table. So that is why foreign key is called as a referential integrity constraint. This is used to build the relationship between the two tables. I'll be going to write how this foreign key constraint will be applied for the table. So while creating the table, you have to write like this: create table department. So first you need to create this table. Why? Because it is a master table. Create table department. So I am having department number whose data type is integer. I'm making this as a primary key. And one more column we have department name. I'm making this as a variable character as 50. Okay. So I created the table department. Okay, I'm making this as a primary key. So now I need to create one more table, which is the table employee table. Employee table. So for that, I'll be going to write create table employee. Here I'm making ID, that is employee ID, integer value. So here make this as a primary key, comma. So how many values, how many attributes we have? Name. Make this as a variable character of 50, comma, and salary. It is an integer value, and one more, it is department number. Department number, D number. It is an integer. See, whatever the data type you are using for this particular attribute in the master table, same data type you have to use in the child table. So here it is integer. That is why I had written here as a integer. Okay. Now foreign key of department number, what it is doing? It is referencing. That is why I have to write references. References. Which table it is referencing? It is referencing department table, that is DEPT. So whatever the name you are creating, same name you should use here. Department table. Which attribute it is referencing? D number. Right here, D number. Okay. So create table employee ID. Here you are making as a primary key. No need to worry about this one. So name is a variable character. Salary is an integer. Department number, it is an integer value. I am specifying this as a foreign key. Foreign key for department number. So what it is doing? It is referencing department table, department number. So that is why I had written like this. Okay. So now the foreign key is a referential integrity constraint. It is used to build a relationship between the two tables. Next constraint is default constraint. So default constraint, when we have to go for this default constraint means I will be going to write create table employee ID integer. Okay, ID is an integer, default as 1. Suppose if you are making this as 1, so I will write the table employee. Okay, so it is having ID, name, salary. Assume that these are all the 3 attributes. Okay, so I will be going to insert the values like this 1, 2, 3, 4. Suppose in any of the row, so I will not be inserting any value to this particular row, then by default it will be going to take the value 1 like this. See, you can ask that. So this is a primary key, so you can't able to enter the duplicate values, but here in this condition I'm not making this as a primary key. So that is why I had written here as a default value as 1. So if you are making this as a primary key, then you can't take the constraint as default. So I'll be going to give one more example, that create table employee. So where city is a variable character of 50, make this as Bangalore. Okay, so that means, so in the employee table, so if this is the case, ID, name, and city. Somewhere you are entering the values like this. ID is 1, Ram, and city is Delhi. Okay. So second, you are entering the value like ID is 2, whose name is Sham. You are not entering any value to this particular. Then by default, it will be going to take the value Bangalore. Okay. So this is whenever you are inserting the value, insert into employee values. In that case, so you are entering 2 and the name is Sham. So if you are not entering the third value, if you are not entering the value for the third attribute, then by default it will be going to take the value whatever you specified while creating the table. So here you have to write default Bangalore. So this is how, like this, default 1. So default value it will be going to take. It is auto increment. So why it is used? If you want to increment any attribute values, okay, then you have to go for this auto increment. So automatically it will be going to increase the value of that particular attribute. Suppose if you are writing like this, create table employee. So ID is an integer. I'm making this as a primary key. And I'm writing auto increment. If you are writing auto increment, then ID name. Suppose if you are inserting like this, then by default it will be going to insert automatically the value of this particular attribute will be going to incremented by 1. So these are all this is about the constraints or the conditions in SQL. I hope you guys understood about this. Thank you.